Hello and welcome back to Through the Trapdoor. I'm Emily.
And I'm Katie.
And this is our podcast where we read you Harry Potter fan fiction.
That's what we do.
My pop filter's all off center for some reason.
Oh, I mean,
It's not like during the last episode someone was grabbing and pulling on it.
the whole time. So, I was listening to Goblet of Wine, and it's their anniversary episode, and they again brought up that 24-hour gap period between
Harry's just unaccounted for,
which I know is just a plot hole. But everybody just keeps, like, going on and on about, like, how did they feed him? I'm like, he was nearly 18 months old. He's like a toddler, not like an infant.
Yeah, like, he just eats regular food.
Regular food.
What really concerns me is that he's 18 months, so he's probably very mobile.
Very.
Walking, or at the very least, crawling everywhere.
Right. So they're just leaving an extremely mobile baby on a doorstep in November. November. It's very cold. Was he swaddled? Was he wrapped in blankets? No, because Dumbledore put that little card in his little baby hand. Like, I know plenty. I've, like, known plenty of 18-month-olds. They're very mobile. They have some of their words.
Yep.
They know what they want, and they will try to point it out to you.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not just going to sleep through the night on a doorstep.
All right, should we read?
I think we should.
This was all happening rather quickly. After their very long conversation in MHQ, Sirius and Melody were talking and laughing, and should he even think flirting? And eating lunch together as though nothing ever happened between them. It was nice, in a way, but it was also kind of weird, especially because Sirius's girlfriend was sitting right across the table from them. Mimi, however, seemed quite absorbed in her conversation with Remus, so Sirius saw no harm in carrying on a conversation with Melody. It would be impossible to get Melody and Mimi to converse with each other. It was a good thing Remus was there to cover Sirius's back.
Have either of them even acknowledged the other's presence at this table? No.
No.
Rude. I would be fuming as just like, Mimi, Melody, who the hell is he dating?
Mimi.
I don't even know.
After all, it was only a little innocent conversation, and hey, did Mimi just laugh and lean over and brush some of Remus's hair out of his eyes? What was Remus doing with hair that long anyway? Wasn't Sirius supposed to have the long hair that fell in his eyes? Why was Mimi even pretending to flirt with Remus? She couldn't possibly be interested in him, could she? Well, that was pretty rude of her, considering she had a boyfriend and all, considering that he was right across the table from her, and ignoring her, kind of half flirting with Melody instead. Oh, damn. Sirius felt like a horrible boyfriend. He felt like a horrible boyfriend most of the time, since he was still attracted to Melody, but right now he felt particularly horrible. Except Mimi did not have to keep flirting with Remus like that. Was she just trying to make Sirius jealous? Because if she was, it was working pretty damn well. Wait, that didn't make sense. Why would Sirius be jealous of Remus for talking to Mimi? True, Mimi was Sirius's girlfriend, but she was only so because Sirius was the meanest boy on the face of the earth, and he was just using her to get to Melody, and apparently he was getting to Melody, judging by the way they were talking right now, but he was also jealous of Remus.
Right, because you're a possessive boy.
Yep. Now, this really didn't make sense. Mimi, Sirius barked. Both Melody and Mimi jumped. Yes, Sirius? Mimi asked, raising one eyebrow at him across the table. I think we need to have a talk, he said. Oh, do we? What about? She asked. The rest of the table seemed to press around them. Sirius glanced around for a moment, then cleared his throat. I think we need to talk about something alone. The other students sighed in disappointment and sat back. Sirius stood, and Mimi shrugged and stood to follow him. Melody and Remus both watched them go, with a bit more disappointment in their eyes than anyone else. What do you think you're doing? Sirius demanded once he and Mimi had found a deserted classroom to talk in. What do you mean, what am I doing? That's what I mean. What are you doing talking to Remus? That's exactly what I was doing, Sirius, talking. Sirius began pacing. Yes, well, I can see that you're talking, but what were you doing with the other stuff? The giggling, the pushing the hair back, the flirting. Mimi perched herself on a desk and smirked at him. Why, Sirius Black, if I didn't know any better, I'd say you were jealous. Well, maybe that's because I am jealous, Sirius informed her, stopping his pacing. Mimi arched an eyebrow at him. Oh, really? That's interesting. And here I was under the impression that you'd forgotten all about me. Forgotten? Sirius sputtered. What do you mean forgotten? Well, you didn't show up to help me with my transfiguration homework, Mimi informed him, and Sirius got a look of terrible recognition on his face that she rather enjoyed. And then you showed up at lunch and started talking to Melody, who, if I remember correctly, you were not even on speaking terms with at breakfast. So tell me, Sirius, what am I supposed to think? Look, Mimi, I'm really sorry about the transfiguration thing. I was on my way there and I sort of got sidetracked. Sidetracked? By Melody, no doubt. Sirius considered lying, but he looked at Mimi, and the glare on her face made him forget about lying. Well, all right, it was Melody, but I knew it, Mimi cried, throwing her hands in the air. God, Sirius, why do you even pretend to like me? Everyone can see the way you look at her. The way I look at her? He sputtered. Yes, with the goo-goo eyes, the jaw-dropping whatever else. God, I don't even know why I agreed to be your girlfriend in the first place. Sirius recovered, feeling a bit angry. Well, if you didn't want to be my girlfriend, you didn't have to say yes. Well, I didn't know you'd still be giving Melody those looks after you asked me out. Oh, the looks, is that what this is all about? Well, yes, it really is. You know, it's pretty terrible to see your boyfriend throw those kind of looks at another girl, even after you've been going out with him for 2 months, Mimi snapped, glaring rather viciously at Sirius. Normally, he would have felt like a slimy, stinky worm, but today he was too fired up. Oh, really? He demanded, placing one hand on either side of the desk Mimi was perched on. Yes, really, Mimi replied, jutting her chin out defiantly. Those are the same kind of looks you give Remus when you think I'm not looking. Uncertainty flashed in Mimi's eyes, and she dropped her defiant stance. She stuttered, and then cut herself off and thought for several moments, pouting. No, she said finally, they're not. Laughing, Sirius stepped away from the desk. Sure they're not. And I'm a blue-spotted hyena. Well, maybe you are, Mimi sputtered. Though it was quite evident to Sirius at this point, she knew she was lying. What are we anyway, Mimi? Sirius asked, shaking his head. Mimi looked at him for a moment. I don't know, she replied. What are we, Sirius? He looked back at her. I don't know what we are. We're a couple that looks at other people as though we wish we weren't a couple. So what are you saying? You think we should break up? Mimi asked, feeling slightly relieved and slightly not that the end of the relationship was approaching. She liked Sirius, of course, but she liked Remus too, and it was getting far too confusing trying to like two boys at once. No, Sirius said, but Mimi blinked in surprise. No? She repeated, what do you mean, no? Sirius began pacing again. What I mean is you're attracted to Remus, obviously, right? Mimi said hesitantly. And I have a thing for Melody, Mimi prompted. Yes, right, Sirius said, clearing his throat. But... Sirius stopped pacing and walked over to Mimi's desk again, putting one hand on either edge. Mimi's heart did a little irregular beat, and his face got closer to hers. You know what's funny? Sirius asked. Mimi shook her head. No, what's funny? This, Sirius replied before leaning in and kissing her. It wasn't passionate or hard or fast or desperate the way some of their snog sessions have been. It was just a very long, soft, slow, nice kiss. It made the butterflies in Mimi's stomach flutter rather intensely. Oh, she whispered when he pulled away. That's unusual. No shit, Sirius agreed, stepping away and running his hand through his hair. Is it even possible to be genuinely attracted to two people at once? Mimi asked, feeling lost. Apparently it is, Sirius replied, looking just as confused. So what do you think we should do? Sirius leaned against another desk and stared at the ground, considering. Well, he ventured, I think maybe we ought to give this another try. Mimi looked at him. You think so? Sirius nodded and looked back at her. I mean, there's obviously something here. Yeah, Mimi agreed. But what about... I think, he said, that we'll just have to agree to get over them. You don't think that maybe we should break up for a bit, sort this out? Well, we could, but we've been carrying on for 2 months, haven't we? I mean, at least from my perspective. Sirius trailed off and then walked a couple steps across the room, grabbed Mimi's hands, and holding them rather protectively in his own. Melody already turned me down once, and I don't think I want to give her another chance to do it again. If there's really something here, I don't want to lose it. Mimi looked at him for several long moments, thinking, You really think this could work? Yeah, I really think it could, Sirius said, sounding more surprised than confident. The surprise is what made Mimi think that it could really work. If he sounded confident, she might think he had been trying to work this out for a while, trying to get her to stay with him for one ulterior purpose or another. But this, he just seemed to be making it up as he went, and she was willing to trust that. Well then, Mimi said, having made up her mind, I guess we're going to stick with it. A grin spread across Sirius's face. Yeah? Mimi smiled. Yeah, she agreed, and Sirius leaned in and kissed her. Really bad timing, though, isn't it? He said, lifting her off the desk and setting her down again. With you going away tomorrow and everything, yes, I suppose it is. Sirius kissed her again. Sorry about that, but at least you won't have to spend the whole month brooding over a breakup. This is much better, Mimi agreed, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. Well, she hadn't quite imagined their conversation going this way, but hey, this wasn't a bad solution either.
I don't know. I feel like at 17, a breakup before you go away for a month is much more plausible.
Yeah. As usual, Lily's necklace research was coming along abysmally. The library books were less than helpful, and with the new knowledge that she couldn't remove her necklace, she was even more confused about where to start. 1 hour, Melody had done everything she could think to do to make herself beautiful for the ball. And there was still a whole hour left before it started. The other girls in her dormitory were still rushing around in a frenzy trying to get ready, but Melody was lounging on her bed, flipping through an old copy of Wish Weekly, trying not to mess up her hair or her dress or her makeup too badly. Her foot was twitching of its own accord, and Melody consciously made it stop, smoothing out the wrinkles it caused in her dress. The gown was white with little gold ivy leaves stitched into it, so delicate you could barely tell there were ivy leaves, only that the gown was white and gold. The gold flecks in Melody's brown eyes stood out too beautifully with the gold in the dress. Her makeup was simple, the light rosy colors over her eyes and on her cheeks, and a little bit of gloss that she already had on her rosy lips, and she was ready to go win Sirius back. Lily was late for the feast. Thankfully, it didn't matter. The students sat at their own house tables and ate first, with Dumbledore advising them to go light on the food so they'd all be able to dance. And then all the students stood, and the headmaster made the house tables disappear. They were replaced instead by many smaller tables on one end of the great hall, and the rest of the room was left open for dancing. Music began to pour in from some undetectable source, and the students poured onto the dance floor to have fun. You look beautiful, James said when he saw her. She wore dress robes that she'd worn for the New Year's party last year, and she hadn't done anything with her hair, but James looked at her like she was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Come on, let's dance. Melody was not late for the feast. She spent half an hour in agony, sitting many seats away from Sirius Black, wondering if he'd noticed her at all. At least she wasn't sitting next to Mimi this time, she reasoned. That was better than nothing. When the dancing started, she got her chance. Melody made sure that she was the first person Sirius saw after the house tables disappeared. Wow, Sirius said. Melody, you look amazing. Do you want to dance? She offered. Sirius nodded and accepted. They danced through most of one song before Mimi cut in, and Melody was shuffled off to dance with some random Hufflepuff sixth-year that she'd never met before. His breath smelled like garlic, and he kept calling her Melanie, and she excused herself as quickly as she could. She found a table where Peter was sitting alone and sat down next to him, glad to be sitting with someone who at least knew her name was Melody. Peter wasn't her favorite person in the world, but she could tolerate him now, and even had a small amount of pity for the way James and Sirius seemed to overshadow him. Not having fun dancing? Peter asked, looking rather uncomfortable in his dress robes. No, I guess I'm not, Melody replied. I hate dancing, Peter said, shaking his head. I don't get how people do it. Well, it's not hard, Melody assured him. Don't tell me that you don't know how to dance, Peter. Peter sighed and laid his cheek on his hand. I don't know how to do anything. Why would dancing be any different? Melody laughed. Well, Peter, that's silly. Everyone can dance. I can't, he said miserably. Melody looked at him for a second and then did something that surprised herself. She was surprising herself a lot these days. Peter, do you want me to teach you how to dance? Peter looked at her surprised. Oh, haha, very funny. I'm not joking, she assured him. Do you want to? Peter didn't know whether or not to believe her. You mean it, really? You want to teach me to dance? Melody nodded, extending a hand to him. Come on, everyone should be able to dance. Well, all right, Peter agreed, looking rather shocked. He took her hand, and Melody led him to the dance floor. Dancing with Peter was quite the experience. He didn't really know what he was doing, and he kept on stepping on Melody's feet, but she found that if she showed him actual dance steps, as opposed to just trying to get him to move with the music, he did all right. This wasn't, of course, Melody's ultimate goal for the night, but it was something reasonably fun to do while she was waiting. Plus, thanks to Melody's initiative, she wasn't the only girl who asked Peter to dance that night. Once people saw him up and dancing, they decided maybe he wouldn't be so bad a partner. If he had just stayed at that table sulking, Melody suspected he'd never have danced with anybody. After teaching Peter to dance, Melody switched partners frequently until she somehow ended up with Remus.
Wait, isn't it a full moon? Why is Remus there?
I don't know how many days it skipped.
No, because at the library, they were talking about how the Halloween ball was tonight. And then she said it was also a full moon.
I don't know.
Why is he at the ball?
Maybe it's still early?
I hope so.
I could have killed you this morning. You know, she told him. Sirius laughed. Oh, really now? Well, aren't you glad I made you talk to him? Melody sighed, reluctant to admit her defeat. I suppose I owe you a bit of thanks, she admitted. I guess I'll say you're welcome, even if you did call me a weaselly little rat, he teased. Did Sirius tell you that? Melody demanded. I'm going to teach that boy a lesson. And speak of the devil. Mimi and Sirius were dancing relatively close, so Melody dragged Remus in their direction and made them swap partners. Melody casually led Sirius away from Mimi and Remus. If she'd really cared about what he told Remus, she would have berated him for it. As it were, she really only wanted an excuse to be alone with him. Sirius, she asked once they'd been dancing for a couple minutes, can we go somewhere and talk? Sirius looked surprised but shrugged. Sure, he said, and they stopped dancing. Melody took his hand and led him out of the great hall, fairly certain no one had noticed them slipping away. There were several couples snogging outside the great hall, but Melody ignored them. She led Sirius down the hallway a bit into a deserted classroom. What do you want to talk to me about that's so important? Sirius asked as soon as Melody had closed the door behind them. Melody examined her fingernails a minute and then looked up at him. She'd rehearsed this many times in her head this afternoon, but all the words she'd thought suddenly seemed worthless. Sirius, she began, uncertain where this was going. Then she said the only thing that seemed worth saying. I love you. Sirius just stared at her for a minute. Oh, Jesus Christ, he yelled, smacking himself on the forehead. Peter had never had so much fun in all his life. Well, all right, maybe going out on adventures with the Marauders was more fun, but he certainly had never had this much fun with girls in all of his life. He'd never talked to so many girls in such a short, expansive time, either. In fact, he talked to so many girls tonight that he couldn't even remember all their names.
Oh, Peter.
Was that a good thing or a bad thing?
I'm going to go with bad thing.
He supposed since he was having so much fun, it was a good thing. Well, he never expected that he'd want to thank Melody Caldwell for anything, but teaching him to dance was certainly the nicest thing she'd ever done for him. If only he could find her, he would thank her, but he hadn't seen her in quite a while. Peter turned around, thinking it might be Melody, but no, it was Mimi. Peter wasn't too fond of Mimi. Then again, he wasn't too fond of Melody either, but he might have been glad to see her for once. You haven't seen Sirius, have you, Peter? I seem to have lost him. Peter shook his head. No, not for a while. Mimi sighed in irritation. Well, if you see him, will you please tell him I'm looking for him? Peter nodded. Sure. Oh, have you seen Melody? Mimi rolled her eyes. Like I keep track of that girl. But then she thought for a minute. No, I haven't seen her. As a matter of fact, I haven't seen her since the last time I saw Sirius. So I bet wherever they are, they're together. Peter shrugged, and Mimi stalked off, clearly irritated. Mimi ran into James and Lily, who were sitting at a table with a couple of pitchers of pumpkin juice, relaxing. You haven't seen Sirius anywhere, have you? She asked hopefully. James and Lily both shook their heads. I haven't seen him for a while, Lily replied, and I think I saw him stepping into the hall a little bit ago. He should be back soon, though, since they were going to say a farewell thing to the aura training students in a minute. Just then the music cut out and Professor Dumbledore asked all the aura training students to come up to the head table. Mimi rolled her eyes. Oh, great, she said. You guys go up there, I'll go find Sirius, and disappeared into the crowd. Sirius was silent. Melody stared at him. Aren't you going to say anything? Say anything? Sirius asked, lifting his head out of his hand. What do you want me to say, Melody? That's great. Oh, really? Hey, I love you too. What? Loved? Melody quavered. Sirius didn't know if he could handle this. He pledged himself to one girl and promised to give up his obsession with Melody this afternoon. Now, here, standing in front of him, looking too damn beautiful for her own good, the girl he'd been fantasizing about for years, offering herself to him. Well, not offering herself, not that way, but still, confessing her feelings and baring her soul and blah, blah, blah. She was doing that. Sirius could have slapped her for it. Wait until now to tell me this, he demanded, recovering from his initial shock. Yes, Melody replied, shifting nervously from one foot to the other. You couldn't have told me this 2 months ago when I asked you out. You had to wait until now, he said, beginning to feel a bit angry. Well, Melody stammered. She tried to think this through. She really had, but it was just coming out wrong. You mean to tell me, Sirius continued advancing on her, that 2 months ago you could have told me that you loved me, but you waited until now, the day before I'm leaving for Aura training, the day that my girlfriend and I decided that we were going to make a serious commitment to our relationship. You pick today to tell me you love me? Well, Melody attempted as Sirius backed her against a wall. Do you think that maybe, just maybe, you could have picked a better time? He thundered. Melody, her back flat against the wall, looked up at him and blinked very quickly, trying not to cry. So you don't love me? She asked, her voice unsteady. Do I? Merlin's pants!
I love that. Merlin's pants.
Sirius said, smacking his hand into the wall next to Melody's head. She stared at it, and then at him, thinking maybe it wasn't such a great idea after all. Melody, he said more softly, leaning his other hand against the wall and turning to face her. If you had said any of this to me even 1 day ago, I would have... Melody brushed her fingers across his lips. He stopped speaking. Sirius stood motionless as her hand traveled up his cheek and was surprisingly non-resistant when she pulled his head down to hers. Sorry, she whispered, her mouth right next to Sirius's. Then she closed the gap between her lips and his, and Sirius wasn't motionless anymore. He knew it was wrong to be kissing Melody, especially with all the things he said to Mimi this afternoon, but damn it, life just wasn't fair. He couldn't just let the girl he loved walk away again without at least kissing her once. Melody was not troubled by any such thoughts. Even if she'd had thoughts, she wouldn't have cared. It was serious. He was kissing her, and things felt right again. No more uncle, no more stupid parties, no more talk of money and shoes and dress robes and stupid petty gossip, just Sirius, just his lips and his tongue and his hands on her back and in her hair and the little butterflies in her stomach. This was right. This was all she wanted. Just him. Just Sirius. But then, the last time she'd let herself go, when was the last time she'd let all of her troubles float away and just be herself with someone? She ran her hands through his hair, down his back, up his chest, and then he pulled her so close all she could do was wrap her arms around his neck, which was very pleasant as well. Melody sighed happily. She could stay in this room with him for the rest of the Halloween ball, and she wouldn't really care. The ball wasn't important anyway. Sirius was important, and he was leaving tomorrow. She'd rather have memories of kissing than dancing. But then the door opened, and Melody's fantasies shattered. A suppressed shriek came from the doorway, and Melody and Sirius jerked apart. Melody turned around slowly, knowing who she'd see. Mimi stood there, her hands clasped over her mouth, her eyes wide with anger and horror and all manner of things that made Melody glad that she was not Sirius. Mimi, I can explain, Sirius said, and Mimi lowered her hands from her mouth, shaking her head. Explain? Explain? Do you think that I want you to explain anything to me? I just for a moment, Sirius begged. Give it a try. Give it another try, you said. There's obviously something there, you said. Give up on Melody, you said. Mimi yelled. You feed me this horseshit and I buy it, then I catch you making out with Melody in a deserted classroom the same day? And you want me to listen to you for a moment? She shrieked. Sirius Black, what the hell is the matter with you? Uh-oh, maybe Melody should take some responsibility for this. Mimi, she began rather meekly. What makes you think I want to hear anything from you? Mimi bellowed. Melody, who was not normally intimidated by Mimi, shrank as far back into the wall as she could. Please, Mimi, Sirius tried again. No, I don't want to hear anything from you. You evil, horrible, misleading, disgusting, awful liar. I believed you. I trusted you. I actually thought you were attracted to me, and all this time you've been making out with her behind my back. Sirius Black, you make me sick, Mimi yelled, choking on a sob before turning and running out of the room. Sirius and Mimi stared at each other. Sirius, Melody managed, finally shaky voice. I'm so sorry. Sirius turned away from her. I don't want to hear anything, Melody. Just leave me alone, he said, rubbing his eyes as he walked out of the room. Melody sank slowly to the floor, bracing herself against the wall for support. Tears brimming in her golden brown eyes, her hands clutched the carpet as soon as they hit it, and she looked around hopelessly, trying not to cry. That had not gone at all the way she'd planned.
So much has happened in that last section.
The end of chapter...
Whatever we're on.
I think it's 16.
I think so.
Yes. The end of chapter 16.
Oh my god. That's a lot.
That was a lot. Any final thoughts?
No.
All right. We will see you guys next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us on our journey through the trapdoor.
You can leave us a review on Facebook or Apple Podcasts. It would literally mean the world to us.
Or you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at TheTrapdoor16.
Or if you have any longer thoughts, you can shoot us an email at throughthetrapdoor16@gmail.com.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you again next week.
See you next week.